Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Oh, the ceiling can't hold us. That is for absolute certain. It's Wednesday night, folks, at latenightsportsradio.com, and that means it's time for the Fantasy Greeks NFL Power Hour. I am Keith Green from 87sportsfans.com, and I'm here being guided through the murkiness of the fantasy football draft preparation process by the Fantasy Greek himself, Jim Sarantias. How are you, sir?
Keith, doing great, man. Not bad for Hump Day. How are you?
Hump Day. Sorry, that's got to be like some kind of copyright now. I just violated like 3 different international trade laws or something by saying it like that. But anywho, it's been a fantastic Wednesday, a beautiful, sunny, not humid day here in Western New York. Got to listen to a complete bunch of BS from Lance Briggs on the NFL Network about how he wanted to punch Jay Cutler in the mouth, and I'm just like. All of these ex-players has got to be Jay Cutler's worst nightmare because they're all going to come in and just talk crap about him. But we're not talking about Jay Cutler today. We are going to break down the wide receiver positions for your fantasy NFL draft. We'll hear every year about the NFL being more of a passing league. So in fantasy football, Jim, is it easier? How do I want to word this question? Because it just the thought just percolated in my head just as I hit the on-air button here. It seems to me like the wide receiver position can get kind of murky. And either you find a really good one or you find some sleepers, and then everybody in the middle gets you a mediocre amount of points. Is the wide receiver position a filler position, or can it be? Can you lead your fantasy team from the wide receiver position, in your opinion?
Can you what again?
Can you lead your fantasy team from the wide receiver position?
Can you lead it?
Like the accepted value is that you have to have a good running back. You have to have at least one really good, 2 pretty good running backs.
Right.
But if you can't get that, is it possible to lead a fantasy team from the wide receiver position in fantasy football, or is it really just kind of filler?
I mean, here's the reality: you have wide receivers these days that are putting up the kinds of fantasy points that you would expect from workhorse running backs, and you have that occurring, with wide receivers who are, ranked 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th amongst other wide receivers. So could you? Yes. I mean, I think you still have to draft yourself, at least with one of your first 2 picks, one of the top running backs in this league. But you could, I think, in the way you've characterized it, sort of lead your team from the wide receiver position. There's a bunch of good ones this year, certainly at the top. What's nice about the position in terms of for fantasy football draft purposes is it's characterized as being deep, and what that means is as you go down the list of wide receivers, as you move from one to the next, the difference isn't much. One to the next, the difference isn't much, and you just kind of sort of keep on going until they're all gone. And even the guys that are going to be on waivers could, be somewhat productive guys, not every single game, but from time to time. And when injuries start occurring, we'll probably see a few of these guys, come up to the top and be some of the better wide receivers in fantasy play. So when you approach your fantasy drafts, while I would counsel that you should get yourself a good wide receiver, don't panic if you don't get one of the top 6. Just don't freak out. Just stick with your board, get your running backs in order, and go get yourself some wide receivers. Because even the guys that are sort of wide receiver 2s, I think there's going to be a few that are going to surprise us this year.
So, in the course of a draft, if your standard redraft league every year, what round should you look to be going at some of these guys?
Well, the guys at the very top, I mean, you can consider them in the late first round. There's no question about it. And then once you get, if you're going to play it that way and get your top wide receiver at the back end of the first round, then you're probably going to get your top running back at the beginning of the second round. Certainly in the third round, guys are coming off the board left and right. It'll be the big round where people really start stocking up on wide receivers if they missed out on anything in the second round. and that's where it's sort of should begin. The first 5 to 6 will likely be all running backs.
Okay. All right. So without further ado, and folks, what we're going to be referencing a lot in this program is the Fantasy Greek's own fantasy football draft guide, published by Jim and an assortment of authors. Some of them more handsome than others. Just saying. That was a self-plug there, in case anybody was wondering. But you can get that right at Amazon. Just search for the Fantasy Greek Fantasy Draft Guide, and away you go on your way to fantasy glory. Did I miss anything in that promo, Jim?
No. Go to Amazon.com, search engine, the Fantasy Greek Draft Guide, and it'll be all yours. Oh, and it comes with a free Skybox subscription, which gets you access to the private part of our site. We get things like game previews, fantasy points allowed, strength of schedule for the fantasy playoffs and the such.
I did forget to mention about the Skybox. So
it's okay.
So without further ado, let's talk some wide receiver, fantasy wide receiver info here. Starting with the top 10. Who's your number 10? Who's at the bottom of the rung here on your list?
And, it's not really at the bottom of the rung, but it's sort of, like you said, it's the top 10. I've got Emmanuel Sanders coming in at number 10 for the Broncos. Last season was his best season as a pro, 101 receptions for 1,400 yards, 9 TDs. And while I don't think he'll repeat that feat, the reality is both Wes Welker and Julius Thomas are gone. We don't really have a third player to sort of come in and fill that vacuum. So Emmanuel Sanders should continue having a strong role in this offense. I mean, it's sort of the Marvin Jones, Reggie Wayne effect from the Colts days. I mean, Peyton Manning is going to get his, even though this will be an offense that will sort of start to focus around the run. They're still going to pass the football. Historically, he hasn't thrown for under 4,600 yards and 37 TDs for the Broncos, and even if Manning throws 30 TDs, he's got to throw that to somebody.
Right. Well, and like we said during the quarterback show, regardless of whether Peyton Manning is getting old, whether he's losing arm strength, it's still Peyton Manning. He's still going to throw the ball a ton. He's going to have hopefully an improved running game this year to kind of take some of the heat, but he's still going to throw a ton. And you can only throw to Demaryius Thomas so much, and I don't know about you. I kind of have reservations about the tight end position in the wake of Julius Thomas leaving, but that leaves more targets to go around to the wide receiver position, and Emmanuel Sanders should be the recipient. I agree. And
that's great.
I'm
glad we could agree. We're suddenly instead of being an old married couple, it's like we've come out of counseling. Things are,
I've learned not to cross you.
Yeah. or in my case, say anything overly critical.
I've learned not to poke the bear.
Or controversial.
Yeah.
Don't poke the bear, my man.
Do not poke the bear. Yeah. All right, number 9.
Number 9. Coming in at number 9, we've got T.Y. Hilton for the Indianapolis Colts. I think there could be some disagreement about where we have T.Y. Hilton ranked. Regardless, I think pretty much everybody agrees he's a top 15 wide receiver. I happen to still like him because he came off a tremendous season last year. And that was as Andrew Luck's primary wide receiver. And this year, while Andre Johnson is going to be in the mix, he's only going to help open up the passing game. He's not going to, suddenly. I mean, sure, Andre Johnson is going to get some passes and he's going to get some yards and he's going to get some TDs that T.Y. Hilton may not have gotten. But I don't think that's exactly going to be true. I think we're going to still see T.Y. Hilton as sort of the leading wide receiver on this team, good for 1,300 yards and 80 receptions, and who knows, maybe he could hit that double-digit TDs. But I still like him right up there as a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy.
Number 9 last year in yards per pass route run.
That's pretty amazing.
T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention this before, but Emmanuel Sanders was actually 8th. So 140 targets for Sanders last year. T.Y. Hilton targeted 123 times. Do you see that number wavering any with Andre Johnson, or do you kind of view Andre Johnson as just a swap out for Reggie Wayne?
I view Andre Johnson as well. Swap out's really tough. I would say he is a swap out for for Reggie Wayne, but the Reggie Wayne of 2 seasons ago, let's say, not last season.
Okay, fair enough.
And I mean, he's going to be a good wide receiver. I think he's going as high as a wide receiver 2. Certainly, he's a great high-end wide receiver 3 in fantasy formats.
Okay, and we may be talking Colts in the second half a little bit more because I have a question about their rookie wide receiver, Philip Dorsett. I want your thoughts on him, but that's later. All right, number 8 on the list.
Number 8 on the list is a guy who's first-round talent, and you're going to get him at a second-round value, and that's A.J. Green of the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, look, he's sort of the forgotten man, and I'm borrowing the words of Rick Flieger right now from the Asylum Fantasy Sports, who wrote his bio in the Fantasy Draft Guide. And he's the forgotten man because he came off an injury-plagued 2014, wasn't the impressive guy that we remember from the prior seasons, but he's back. He's healthy. He's dynamic. He's amazing. He's a guaranteed 90 reception, 1,300 yard, 9 to 10 TD receiver in that offense because, I mean, Tyler Eifert, I think, will be a great receiver, but A.J. Green will be the dominant pass catcher on that team, and he's just, God, I'd love to have him on my team this year.
So, at Pro Football Focus, they keep a stat called wide receiver rating. That's the quarterback rating of throwing just to that wide receiver. So, for instance, number 1 was Randall Cobb. Aaron Rodgers had 134 rating when throwing to Randall Cobb. Jordy Nelson was 2. So, what does that tell you about Aaron Rodgers? A.J. Green, 35th on that with just a 90 rating. There's
I find that hard. Well, here, I mean, I don't think that's A.J. Green's fault.
No, I'm not trying to say that. It's more of a product of the offense.
Okay. Well, I would say it's a product of Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton really, I know he had that decent season a couple seasons ago, but he's not tearing down the wall in terms of, breaking or on the precipice of breaking NFL records as a quarterback.
Right.
And, as a fantasy quarterback, I know people have been high on him. I still like him as a high-end QB too. I wouldn't draft him as the quarterback to lead my fantasy team. But, he could be in for a decent season. He's got 3 decent pass catchers in A.J. Green, Tyler Eifert, and Gio Bernard. So we'll see.
Oh, which brings up another question, if especially for folks that maybe are new to fantasy football and or maybe are tired of sucking and just want to start winning. When you're looking at wide receivers, how much do you weigh in the quarterback throwing him the ball?
I think it depends. Certainly, if the quarterback is a good quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, I would say absolutely. You weigh that in quite heavily. I mean, he helps a player like Devontae Parker be a late-round flyer in fantasy football formats for a variety of reasons. Compared to, let's say, a wide receiver, somebody playing for the Texans, where you can question the quarterback play. It's not as good. They're not going to put up as many yards. However, that having been said, a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a solid fantasy wide receiver, especially as a wide receiver too, because he's a player much like Andre Johnson that can go up and get the football. And if you watched Hard Knocks like I did yesterday, Keith, you could see he looked good connecting with his quarterback. So I think that chemistry will remain. He's just one of those players that does well with anyone that's the quarterback. And what's even better in his situation, his targets are just going to go through the roof. I mean, he'll be at 150, 160 targets this year. It's crazy. It's
right.
So much opportunity. You've got to like that in a wide receiver too.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. It's just you start to wonder because like the perfect example that I use in this situation is Larry Fitzgerald. A tremendous wide receiver talent, but outside of the years that he had Kurt Warner throwing to him, and Carson Palmer before the injury, you never knew what you were going to get from him from week to week in fantasy. It was a risky play every week. And it's got nothing to do with Fitzgerald's talent or ability to catch the ball, but it was just a question of the overall function of the offense. So I think there's a little bit of that with A.J. Green just because Andy Dalton is not the all-world quarterback that Bengals fans think he is.
Well, and another example that has sort of come up in the last couple of days here is Brandon Marshall. with Geno Smith out 4 to 6 weeks, I think his value gets a little bit of a bump up. If only because Ryan Fitzpatrick, while he is not going to blow up the fantasy football world, you can expect him to have sort of a steadier ball. You expect him to be more consistent. You expect him to put up slightly more yardage than Geno Smith, and that should benefit a guy like Brandon Marshall. Now, I suppose the big question is how long is that going to last? If it's only going to last a few weeks into the season, then do you really boost Brandon Marshall's fantasy value by that much? The answer is probably no. But he's certainly now in wide receiver 2 territory, and maybe a guy worth taking a chance when some of these other names come off the board.
I'm sorry, you said the quarterback taking over for Geno Smith was named Fitzpatrick. I'm pretty sure his name is Fitzmagic. Maybe that's just because of the Western New York media covering his time in Buffalo. He went from Fitzmagic to Fitztragic overnight. It was fantastic. It was a whirlwind. You got whiplash watching how fast everybody's opinions changed on him.
Yeah, pretty much. Huh? I mean, he had that great rookie season or whatever season that was, got a huge contract, and then everything pretty much went downhill.
Now, how about the linebacker that broke Geno Smith's jaw getting picked up by the Bills today?
Was he really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's just priceless.
Absolute gamesmanship. Here, thanks for doing that. We're just going to give you a contract so you don't lose your cash. Anywho, all right, number 7 wide receiver for the 2015 fantasy football season.
Oh, and this guy's going to be a favorite of a lot of people. I mean, in PPR leagues, you could even give him a sort of a slighter edge over the next wide receiver in my list, and that's Antonio Brown of the Steelers. This guy has just been off the hook crazy good. I mean, he's 100 reception sort of receiver, 1,300 yards, 8 to 10 TDs, and regardless of all the improvement on the Steelers lineup, team. I mean, whether it be Le'Veon Bell, Martavius Bryant, everybody just knows Antonio Brown and Ben Roethlisberger have a certain chemistry that you want to package and you want to give to other teams, but you can't. And he's just good. So with these next few wide receivers, I mean, any one of these guys, if you get him on your team, you're obviously in good shape.
Okay. So Antonio Brown, the Steelers. I've seen some rankings have him number 1. I think that's a little inflated, and I think because you can't underestimate just how much Le'Veon Bell is going to get the ball, and make a difference. So I think where you've got him pegged right here is probably pretty good and pretty accurate. But for anybody trying to sell high on Antonio Brown being the number 1 overall wide receiver, personally, I say buyer beware. But that's true.
I would too. I would really hesitate at putting him at number 1.
Okay. Number 6.
Number 6, you got to go with the Packers' Jordy Nelson. I mean, he has been just a model of consistency for that team. I mean, I know he's been injured a couple times, but it hasn't been anything major, anything that he couldn't come back from. Last season, boy, he blew it up. 98 catches for 1,519 yards and 13 TDs. He is Aaron Rodgers' go-to guy. And although, he's not Calvin Johnson or some of these other wide receivers who are the big-time, catch everything over the top kind of guys, I mean, he's just been a solid wide receiver, and you put him down for 1,400 yards, double-digit TDs, 95 receptions, and forget about it. He's going to be a week-in, week-out play, and he'll do good things for you.
Yeah, Jordy Nelson, he's kind of diminutive when you watch him on TV.
He's no Calvin Johnson.
Right. He's 4th in the NFL in targets last year. That's
pretty amazing.
Just ridiculous. Because when you think of the Packers passing game, you think Randall Cobb. Yeah. But it's Jordy Nelson getting the lion's share, no pun intended, Detroit fans, of the love, and he was tied for 6th with Antonio Brown, who we just talked about, in yards per pass route run. So he's doing some hard work for that Green Bay passing attack and reaping the benefits.
Great route runner and not respected very much in terms of his speed.
No. Correct, sir. So that's my best Ed McMahon impersonation. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. I know.
It didn't generate any
I didn't
thoughts in my head of Ed McMahon, just so you know.
I know. My best doesn't mean good. Just, I'm aware of that. All right.
But you do have good hair. That's all that matters.
Oh, this matted down head mess. That's fantastic. Thank you for the kind thoughts. But number 5. Let's keep it moving. Don't talk about my hairstyles. Much.
Well, number 5. I mean, here's a player that he could easily be a number 1 wide receiver any time he wants to be, and that's Demaryius Thomas of the Broncos. He has done no worse than 1,430 yards, 10 TDs, and 92 receptions since Peyton Manning joined the Broncos. Do you believe that?
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of how you look at him. Even when he didn't have the greatest of quarterbacks, he was still just such a dominant receiver in the league that he's up there. He's up in the top 5. He's a big guy. In the Super Bowl, when the Broncos had their clocks cleaned, I mean, he was beating the double coverage that they put on him and came up with over 100 yards receiving and a score. So there is nothing in my mind that Demaryius Thomas cannot do. And for fantasy purposes, you're set if you get him.
What if I told you, and this is kind of a stupid stat because there's 7 players tied for second here in the league. What if I told you that Demaryius Thomas was one of those 7 players tied for second in the most interceptions on his targets?
Oh, wow. I'd be really surprised.
Yeah, 6.
Wow.
Out of the 178 targets, which is just an insane amount of targets, 178 targets, 6 interceptions on balls thrown his way. But still, like we said with Emmanuel Sanders, it's Peyton Manning. It's Demaryius Thomas is by far the number 1 wide receiving talent on that team. He was second in the league in yards per pass route run, so he's running those deep routes for you. He's the guy. If you have to have a Broncos receiver, he's the one you want to target first. And if he's not one of your first wide receivers that you take, I will go out on a limb and say you will be playing catch up at that position.
And you would be correct.
Okay. Just looking for any kind of validation, whether you agree or disagree. Keith, shut up, move on. Anything for crying out loud. All right.
I'm here for you, Keith.
Thanks, appreciate that. With friends like you. Number 4.
Number 4. I could hear the catcalls now and the people saying he should be ranked higher, especially those Dallas Cowboy fans. Dez Bryant. What can you say about Dez Bryant? Career high and league high 16 TDs last year. Just utterly, utterly amazing. He's going to have a big year when all we can do is sit here and worry and panic about what the Dallas Cowboys rushing game is going to look like. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver. Question is whether he goes number 1. If you think he could do better than 16 TDs, God bless you, take him first. I got him pacing similar numbers this year as last year, and this is where I put him. I put him in at 4th, and can you argue that he's higher than at least 2 out of the next 3 guys? You could, but, hey. Dez Bryant, baby.
Dez Bryant is the one guy that I try to pry off whichever owner has him, just because he's a beast. And, yes, that was a catch in the playoffs. Anyway. I said it. That's right, I said it.
Not.
I did.
Play that back.
I did. I didn't say anything. All right. Number 3.
What changed your mind?
No, I believe that was a catch. It should have been a catch. It was a bad. It's the rule. By the rule, it's an incompletion, but it was a catch. It should have been a catch.
Not an incompletion. That sucker was a catch. Walks like a duck, talks like a duck. It's a duck.
I hear you. Sometimes we humans make things harder than they have to be.
Controversy.
Yeah.
Just terrible. Anyway.
Speaking of making things harder than they have to be, did you hear about Deflategate? No, I'm just kidding. Number 3 on your list.
Number 3 on my list. And again, like I say, I could easily see putting Dez Bryant ahead of this guy, but not by much. We're starting to split hairs at this point. And that's Julio Jones of the Falcons. I mean, this guy, he's been on pace for over 100 receptions and over 1,650 yards and 6 TDs. the past 2 seasons. Can you believe that? The
Wow.
past 2 seasons. Now, one season he was hurt, and he might have missed games last year, but I mean, he was on pace for those kinds of numbers. There's nothing in my mind that makes you think it's going to be different. In fact, if they can establish the running game that the Falcons seem to it looks like they're going to have a running game this year. That's only going to help him and the Falcons passing game. So that's why in PPR, Julio Jones he's a monster. So I love him at number 3.
And he was fourth in the league in yards per pass route run, so he's getting the depth. And Matt Ryan with a 102.3 rating when throwing his way. So they just locked him up for an extension. It was probably the smartest thing that they could have done as a franchise. So he's not going anywhere. Now that Matt Ryan character, let's debate him. I'm just kidding. I'm not a Matt Ryan fan. Anyway,
I mean, we could, and when I talked about quarterbacks the other night, Matt Ryan came up and Matt Ryan versus Matt Stafford, and I gave my tip of my hat to Matt Ryan, if only because he's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks, a regular top 10. I also want to say that he's typically 4,300 yards or more, 46, something like that, the past 3 seasons, as well as 26 TDs or more. So, you got to hand it to him, and he's got a good cast of characters around him. And I'm also interested to see how they develop the tight end this year. I like the addition of Jacob Tamme. I don't think that was just to bring him on and have him become a blocking tight end. I think it's to bring him in and to get him involved in the passing game.
Okay. Wow.
We're down to 2.
Number 2. And this guy, I was fortunate enough to scoop off the waiver wire and kind of stash him on my bench because he started the year early last year and came on and was all world, one-handed catches aside. Number 2,
Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr. And I talked about this off air. My rankings, I've adjusted them where I actually have him number 1 and our next guy number 2, but it's still such a toss-up, such a close call. Odell Beckham Jr. put up monstrous numbers in just 12 games, 1,305 yards and 12 TDs. Regardless of Victor Cruz coming back, who will be a weapon in his own sort, more than likely a wide receiver 3 for fantasy purposes, I don't see Odell Beckham suddenly slowing down. I mean, he caught, I believe it was more than half of Eli Manning's touchdowns last year. That tells you a lot about what Eli Manning thinks of Odell Beckham Jr. We all remember that great catch he made in the end zone on Dallas. We know what he can do when the ball's thrown his way. Don't hesitate. If you take him number 1, take him number 1, number 2, whatever. I mean, people have him going in the middle of the second round, and I just don't see that. I think that's really sort of missing. I mean, where were you last year?
Right.
So.
Right. He was my number 1 keeper. It was like one of the guys that I knew I wasn't letting go. I don't care what goes on with the Giants this year, whether you believe in Eli Manning or not, or their failure to really find a running game. Odell Beckham Jr. Odey Jr. is the real deal, and I'll be happy to ride him all the way to another championship. Thank you very much. All right, so that leaves one fairly obvious name. If listeners haven't figured it out already, number 1 on your wide receiver list.
Do you want to say it?
It is. See, this is why I wish I had a drum roll queued up here, but I don't. It's Calvin Johnson, folks. Calvin Johnson, Detroit Lions wide receiver. Now that's a team that's been kind of in flux. You have the taking over of Jim Caldwell and everything like that. And Matthew Stafford didn't really have a very dominant year last year. And Calvin Johnson battled injuries last year as well. But having Calvin Johnson ranked number 1, Jim, can we all be? I know you just said it, that your rankings have changed. How like on a scale of 1 to 100, what's your confidence level in Calvin Johnson here?
My confidence level?
Like that he can be like what you said, Rick Flieger wrote on the site here, 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns or more.
Yeah, I mean, he's crazy. I mean, his numbers are it's crazy. This guy, he's a vacuum when you throw the ball up in his direction. Throw 2-3 guys on him and he'll go catch the football. I mean, it just, and for the Lions, if they could get their running game going, if they've got Golden Tate, and I think that was an excellent addition last year, if they could get their tight end involved in the passing game. I was trying to sit down and write an article on that in terms of the Lions today, and I had a hard time because in terms of numbers, I don't know that I could really show what a difference it would make. But in terms of play on the field, I think you just have to, look around and say, if they could just get one guy in the middle of the field catching the football and opening things up, I mean, it's gonna open up things on the side as well. I mean, this offense would just flow so much better as opposed to, hey, they're in a jam, they're down 14 points, throw it to Calvin Johnson.
Right.
I mean, it's such a playground way of playing pro football. I mean, it really shouldn't be that way. But that having been said, that is part of the reason why Calvin Johnson, in my mind, if he's not number one, he's number two wide receiver in fantasy football. He's just the go-to guy.
Yeah, he's that big body, that big guy. He's a freak, really, an animal, if you will. But you look at the Detroit Lions roster; it's a pretty young offensive line. Last year they didn't really execute well, either run blocking or pass blocking. I don't know how much that had to do with Matthew Stafford's less than stellar year. And again, Stafford's year, I don't think last year was bad. It just wasn't what we're used to seeing out of that offense. And like we said, Johnson was battling injuries a little bit there, but Joique Bell starts on the PUP list. Theo Riddick, by default, steps into the backfield. Rookie Amir Abdullah, who I know you were very bullish on when we did the running backs. There's a lot of question marks about this, but Calvin Johnson should be the steady Eddie of what we think he should be.
Yeah, he should. And again, you're talking about like this top 5 grouping of wide receivers, and you're kind of, you're really just trying to pick out which guy is in the best situation. And that's why somebody who would argue to me, Des Bryant, I mean, okay, I guess I could see that. But, I just love Calvin Johnson, and I really love Odell Beckham Jr. And like you, I picked him up off waivers in one of my leagues, and, I have absolutely, just to see how he played last year, I don't see why he cannot do it again, unless he's injured. That's the only thing.
Well, there you have it, folks. The top 10 wide receivers going into the 2015 season, as found at thefantasyweek.com. Head there, sign up for the Skybox to get all the up-to-date, last-minute rankings, changes. Buy yourself a copy of the draft guide available at Amazon.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about rookie wide receivers you should have your eyes on. You're listening to the Fantasy Greeks NFL Power Hour on Late Night Sports Radio.
Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
And you're just a fantasy owner hoping for success this year. Well, you know what? The best way to do that is head over to thefantasygreek.com and sign up for the Skybox. All of the last-minute breaking news, up-to-date fantasy football advice that help you on your way to fantasy glory. That's thefantasygreek.com. And also go to amazon.com and pick up a copy of the Fantasy Greeks Fantasy Football Draft Guide, an absolute must-have if you're going to be taken seriously in your league.
And it comes with a free Skybox, Keith.
Well, see, perfect.
$18 value for free.
You can kill two birds with one stone right there.
There you go. There you go.
All right, second half of the program. We have about 20 minutes left. It's not really second half, but you know what I mean, kids. And while we're talking fantasy football wide receivers, after if you're catching us late, we went through the top 10 receivers for 2015 who you should be targeting. And now we're going to talk about some rookies that, unless you're in a deep dynasty/keeper league, maybe won't be on the radar much, but by the end of the year could turn out to be a nice sleeper for you. If you're watching the waiver wire, if you're paying attention, if you're up at 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning to grab these guys before anybody else can, depending on your league rules, of course. So, Jim, just real quick, we go down this list here. One is kind of obvious because all the reports coming out of camp is that he is absolutely tearing it up on every level. I guess we'll see it in a game soon. Amari Cooper of the Raiders. Are you buying on this guy, or are you kind of waiting and seeing?
No, I'm buying on Amari Cooper. I think I've got him as a wide receiver too in fantasy, which I know that might be. It's tough to look at a rookie and give him that much credit, but I really do think that here's the guy that. He's got a big-time solid resume out of Alabama. It was the top receiver, even though he didn't necessarily have the best quarterbacking there. And now he's joining a young quarterback in Derek Carr, who actually looks solid. They've had time to develop some chemistry during camp and the such. And I really like him for 1,000 yards and 8 TDs on 80 receptions. There's just no doubt in my mind that he could put those kinds of numbers up based on his route running and based on the kind of player he is.
Okay. Like, any reservation about just Derek Carr being young and that offense being kind of unproven? It's a new regime. Jack Del Rio takes over as head coach. Any reservations on that side at all?
No, because, let's say Carr doesn't have the greatest of seasons and throws for 3,500 yards. Well, 1,000 of that, I think, will go to Amari Cooper.
Okay.
So,
when you say it like that, it makes total sense.
Yeah. Believe, Keith. Believe.
Believe. Yes. Okay. So the next person on my list, somebody that has been hampered by what everyone is calling a minor injury, but it's really hindered him in getting ready for his rookie season, and that's the Bears' first-round pick, Kevin White, someone who I predicted great things from in my article for thefantasygreek.com, and then it seems as soon as that piece got retweeted the 50-something odd time, that's when all of a sudden all this news came out about his shin splints and not being able to not being able to run. What's the ceiling on Kevin White now? Let's say he gets back on the field by week 4 or 5. Well, where do you think that he could be a formidable? I'm not going to ask you to put numbers because that's just ridiculous. Do you think he can be a formidable fantasy threat by week 16, week 17 if he stays off the field that long?
Well, real quick, first, I don't know that Kevin White will be off the field that long. He had shin splints, and anybody who's been an athlete has had those before, and all it really is a matter of is resting, just not running, and my understanding he's back to running. So I see him coming back. I know your analysis was that he would be the number one go-to guy, and correct me if I'm wrong, by week 6 of the season.
Correct.
Certainly that might get pushed back, but I mean, I'm having a hard time looking at this offense and not seeing him as a major contributor in it. I mean, if all goes well.
Yeah, and I think he will eventually step into the role in the offense that Brandon Marshall held, that ex-receiver, the guy the big physical guy that can be the number one target. And Alshon Jeffrey will still have a fantastic fantasy season because he'll be benefiting from the attention that defenses will have to give him and Martellus Bennett and Eddie Royal. You got to cover somebody. Oh, and don't forget about Matt Forte out of the background.
Now I've got him as sort of a low-end wide receiver 4, so that means he'd be a bench play. And just looking up his ADP, and Kevin White's going in the 9th round. It's a little earlier than I would expect, but that is still a decent value for a player that's got a lot of upside, assuming that Jay Cutler, produces.
Hasn't thrown an interception in training camp yet. Not one.
Yeah, okay. I'm holding my breath that'll continue into the season.
Well, I hear that, and I'm like, well, either he's having a really good camp or everyone's forgetting how bad this defense was last year and just not making anybody look good. All right, Max Williams of the Ravens. What's the deal with him? You were big on this guy. You were one of the first people touting this guy out of Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm still big on Max Williams, and, I think what the Ravens are going to bring to the table is going to be interesting. And it's going to be interesting because when you look at the team overall, the only real wide receiver that they have is Steve Smith. And, talk is they want to try and reduce his snaps, which I don't think is going to happen. But he said, this is my last year as a pro. And, they've got Brashad Perriman, who I think he's going to be one of the rookies that we should be talking about. And they got Max Williams. And outside of them, I don't know who they got. Justin Forsett, but, he's a running back.
Right.
So I like Max Williams. I like him as literally one of the last tight ends to draft in fantasy, or as a late round flyer, put him on your bench because he should be a guy that should be able to produce for you as the season progresses.
What's the maybe I missed it because I was distracted momentarily off screen here. What's the timeline on Dennis Pitta? Is he done? I mean, he's on the PUP list, I know, but
I haven't really heard too much about Dennis Pitta, but it's also one of these things where, given the severity of his injury and the struggles that he's had, I don't really have a positive outlook for him. I'm looking up what his current status is, and here it is. He still hasn't been cleared to practice.
Yeah,
so even expect Crockett Gilmore to have a role in the offense this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm saying wow based on this, like, as far as fantasy football goes, like Dennis Pitta was supposed to be the thing as far as tight ends go, and then just in the blink of an eye, it's over injury wise. Nothing he did, just unfortunate.
It is really unfortunate. Talented kid, and it just, it happens.
All right, I'm going to go out of order because I want to make sure I talk about this guy. It's somebody that I flip-flop back and forth pretty much daily when I'm thinking about wide receivers in fantasy football, and that's Nelson Agholor of the Philadelphia Eagles. What's your take on Agholor?
Well, you have to like him. He's definitely going to be in the second running in the offense for the Eagles. I like Jordan Matthews. I think Jordan Matthews is a solid wide receiver too. What's his name? The tight end.
Ertz.
Yeah, Zach Ertz will likely be, with the exception, they're going to be running the offense through the running backs, but then you have Jordan Matthews, Zach Ertz, and then Agholor is a guy that, I would prefer to get him as a wide receiver 4, simply because he is a rookie, but he is going as high as the middle of the 7th round, and that having been, he's even going in the 5th round apparently, but his average is in the middle of 7th round. I think, treating him as a wide receiver 3 might be a little too, I think that's too aggressive for him until we see how he does in that Chip Kelly offense. That's how I view him.
Okay. Dorial Green Beckham from the Titans. Now, there's a lot of red flags that come up with him. There's the fact that he sat out his senior year or last year in college at Missouri. There's the fact that it's either going to be Zach Mettenberger or Marcus Mariota throwing to him. Neither one of them strikes the most fantasy confidence in me. Am I out of line here with that, or is Dorial Green Beckham somebody that we should be kind of trying to grab in the later rounds and stash on a bench?
I think at best he's a late round grab. He's got a lot of things going against him. One of them is that he's got wide receivers like Kendall Wright and Justin Hunter on the roster with him, as well as Harry Douglas. He's got a rookie quarterback on the roster, which suggests there'll be a run-heavy team. Now, that having been said, reports are that they are working him into the first team. Even if he gets worked in as the third receiver, that means he'll be in on 40 to 50% of the snaps, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll be productive. So to me, he's a late-round flyer at this point of his career, who's got a higher ceiling as if everything goes well with Marcus Mariota.
All right. We're running out of time here. We've got 9 minutes. I want to make sure we talk about some of these other higher-profile rookies. Brashad Perriman for the Ravens.
Yeah.
Right. I know it's preseason and depth charts don't really mean anything, but our lads has him playing behind Kamar Aiken right now. Do you figure he's going to weigh in here on the offense in any kind of meaningful manner?
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he didn't. My guess is where he's being listed is something to push him. He's an extreme talent. Again, all they have is Steve Smith. Even if Steve Smith posts another 1,000-yard season, which I can foresee him doing, Brashad Perriman should be working to this offense, sooner rather than later. I think ideally you want to get him as a wide receiver for. Let's see what his average draft position is. He's being drafted in the late 9th to 10th round as a wide receiver for. So that would work well.
Okay. Carolina Panthers, Devin Funchess, the second-round pick this past year. Now, when you think of wide receivers in Carolina, you think of Kelvin Benjamin, and then you think of like a amalgamation of leftover parts here. But Corey Brown is currently listed as the other starter. I know it's preseason depth charts. Don't say nothing. I know it doesn't mean anything. But you also have Jericho Cotchery and Ted Ginn, some veteran presences that maybe not have been game breakers in the past, but they're veterans. They know how to play the game. They know what they're doing. Do you see Funchess making a difference here on offense?
I think to the extent he makes a difference, it's going to be helping Kelvin take some of the heat off of Kelvin Benjamin. He's another big-bodied wide receiver, just like Kelvin Benjamin. It's going to be Cam Newton playing catch with his two wide receivers and Greg Olsen. Now, was Devin Funchess put up the big-time yards? Probably not. Could he end up being a red zone threat? Absolutely. So this could be a situation where we see mid-level yardage, 400, 500, 600 yards, but then a whole bunch of touchdowns. For fantasy purposes, I would, again, at best to me, he's a late-round flyer because you could get some better players at those numbers that I was just discussing. But, Devin Funchess will go as the offense goes. If anything happens to Kelvin Benjamin, obviously Devin Funchess would get a huge boost.
Right. Okay. It's just with Cam Newton, everyone said, "Oh God, when they get this guy some targets, he's going to be pretty amazing." He's got Greg Olsen, Kelvin Benjamin, those two veterans that I named before, and Cotchery and Ginn, and now the wide receiver from Michigan, the rookie Devin Funchess. It seems like the offense should be catching up to where the defense is. And maybe Carolina makes that step this year. Just wait and see there. The Indianapolis Colts took Miami wide receiver Philip Dorsett in the first round this year. I think you were one of the ones that wasn't crazy about that pick when it happened. Andrew Luck is that kind of passer where he just elevates everyone around him. So from that aspect alone, how much value does Philip Dorsett have in fantasy football this year?
I would say very little. And the reason being is he's on a team with Andre Johnson, T.Y. Hilton, Dante Moncrief. The tight ends, Dwayne Allen, Kobe Fleener. He's going to have Frank Gore, who's going to get his share of catches. So to me, Philip Dorsett will have a big role in the kick return game. He has some upside if the injury bug should hit. I could see him getting worked in a little bit quicker. But in terms of fantasy value, at best, he's worth a late round flyer. And in fact, current ADPs have him going like in the 14th round.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
See, and again, this is where I tend to make mistakes when I draft because I hear Dorsett, and while I don't expect any rookie wide receiver to be, blowing the doors off, except for the select few, I would think, oh, Andrew Luck, I got to take a flyer on him, just because of that. But this is where I would lose.
That would be my reaction if they didn't pick up Andre Johnson.
Well, fair enough. Fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point.
And what was shocking about the pick, besides the timing of the pick, was, I think to a very large degree, was given this situation. How many of these receivers they had. Now, T.Y. Hilton, he's in the last year of his contract, which I think bodes well for T.Y. Hilton. I mean, he's going to go out there and he's going to go full steam. Now, I know they're working on trying to sign him before the season starts, so we'll have to see. But, it was just one of those things, I found it a little bit shocking when I thought they had other needs on the roster.
All right. And the last rookie of any magnitude on this list here is the Miami Dolphins, Devontae Parker, who's on the PUP list to start. What's your view on him? Anybody on the PUP list, obviously, they're probably not going to play, I don't know, within the first 1 to 4 weeks of the season, but is there any value on deeper leagues, especially like keeper and rookie drafts, where you can maybe pick up this guy and stash him somewhere?
Absolutely. He's a great young talent that is in a pass-friendly offense. Now the offense is a bit stacked with different players, just to say the least. Pulling up their depth chart, you take a look-see, and you see he's going to be competing with Greg Jennings, Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Matthews, and but he doesn't have far to go. I mean, Greg Jennings doesn't scare me because he's a veteran, and eventually they're going to move on from him, and Rashard Matthews certainly doesn't scare me either. So I can eventually see Devontae Parker moving into that top 3 in terms of the passing game. Now, will he ever be anything better than a wide receiver 2 once he hits his career peak? That's hard to say because these other guys are some pretty good receivers. But we'll see. He's in a dynasty league, he's definitely a top 12 pick.
All right, there you have it, folks. We have exhausted the. We have exhausted the wide receiver position for fantasy football. Next week, tune in Wednesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at LateNightSportsRadio.com. We will go over tight ends. Maybe we could probably combine tight ends and defenses. No, do you think next week? Yeah, we'll talk about it off. We'll talk about it off for you. Yeah. For Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com, follow him on Twitter at thefantasygreek. I'm Keith Grieve from 87sportsfans.com. You can follow the sports stuff at 87sportsfans. Have a good week, y'all. It's been fun.
Turn out the lights. The party's over.